Hi, thank you for joining me. I'm Mindy Mandell, and as you can see, I am once again here alone. Unfortunately, Jacob has been ill and he needs another week or so of rest, but hopefully he'll be back next week. No problem, though, I'll go forward on my own. So we're going forward with the Sophist, and as I've been doing, I'm using the Loeb Classical Library. This is Harold North Fowler is the translator. And for those of you who do not already have this book, there is a link in the description box for a PDF. So just a quick review of last week. We saw that I'm going to call him the sophist, the stranger, he decided that if we want to look for what a sophist is, we want to define a sophist, the best way to do it is to look for something irrelevant to us. And so he chose to look for an angler, somebody who's of no real consequence in our lives. Now, by the way, we can see some comparisons to the Parmenides in a few senses here, is that it is a dialectic where you have one person questioning another, and in both dialogues you have the questioner has looked for the youngest person who won't give him too much trouble and will just follow the dialogue, follow the argument without necessarily offering any opinions. And so they both have that same structure, but you can question if they're doing it for the same reason or not. Whereas this stranger is looking for something irrelevant to look into. In the Parmenides, Parmenides takes his highest vision and he explores that. And so you have that very big difference there. Um, what we saw last week in his um, dialectic, we can call it that, on the angler, we saw that there was a lot of figurative language that was used in a very creative way. We saw that you have these titles here, you can see on the screen here, these are what he called each of the categories, but then the members didn't necessarily match the class. And there was a lot of question as to even why he made these divisions as he did. Is he defining what it is, or is he looking at how it functions, or when it's used, like at night or daytime, as you can see it down here? And so there are a lot of very questionable definitions. And going to the text now, we can see where we left it off is he said that we're going to use this as a pattern to try to find what a sophist is. And so, if he's using that as a pattern and that was already a lot of sophistry, then you can guess if he's following the same pattern, we're going to see a lot of sophistry here as well. And then we saw there was a little bit of play on art versus wisdom. Also, throughout all of this and through with the angler, and we'll see it again here, is he doesn't use the word art in its proper definition as it's used in philosophy. He uses it more as a skill and or a technique, which is in art, properly speaking, though should benefit its subject. Like medicine, um, it's not for the doctor that the doctor performs his art or her art, it's for the patient. And you can think of other examples as well, right? So we have to be careful how we use art and notice that the things he's calling art are not necessarily art at all. Um, but now let's see what he does next here. He says that we must assume that he, the sophist, has an art of some kind. Theaetetus says, well, then, what in the world is this art that he has? He says, good gracious, have we failed to notice that the man is akin to the other man? Who's akin to whom? The angler to the sophist. How so? They both seem clearly to me to be a sort of hunters. What is the hunting of the second? We've spoken about the first. Well, we just now divided hunting as a whole into two classes and made one division, that of swimming creatures, and the other that of land hunting. And he's going to go on here to make some more divisions. Now, before we go on, though, I think it's really important to see that he's using the word hunting here as a metaphor. And you cannot build a definition on a metaphor. And so right out of the gate, we can already see there's sophistry going on here. It's a sort of hunter, meaning my Alexa just talked to me out of nowhere. Um, it's a it's a metaphor, meaning that it's not a real hunter, which means you cannot build a definition on that. But if we come back here, what we're going to see is that he's picking it up from this point here, where some were land creatures and some were swimming or flying. So there's the pedestrian and those that are not on foot. So that's where he's picking it up. So what he's doing now is he's saying, let's just assume, without any discussion, we'll just accept it on a given, that all of this matches the same with the angler and the sophist. They're both have a similar art of hunting, even though it's actually just a metaphor in the case. Actually, in both of them, it's not. You can question if fishing is actually a form of hunting. It's kind of stretching it even there, but maybe you can make a better case for it as being literally hunting, whereas the sophist is figuratively hunting. But still, we're going to just pretend that all of this is the same for both the angler and the sophist, and then we're going to pick it up from this point. So that's just to follow the logic of his organization. Okay, so he picks it up here, says, we just now divided hunting as a whole into two classes and made one division, that of swimming creatures, and the other, that of land hunting. Yes. And the one we discussed so far as the swimming creatures that live in the water are concerned. But we left the land hunting undivided, merely remarking that it has many forms. Certainly. Now up to that point, the sophist and the angler proceed together from the starting point of acquisitive art. Again, he's just accepting as a given that they follow together from acquisitive art down to here. No argument, no discussion. And he says, I think they do. So he's following the argument without question. But they separate at the point of animal hunting, where the one turns to the sea and rivers and lakes to hunt the animals in those, to be sure. But the other turns toward the land into rivers of a different kind. So notice again the figurative language. Rivers of wealth and youth, bounteous meadows, as it were, and he intends to coerce the creatures in them. What do you mean? Of land hunting, there are two chief divisions. What are they? One is the hunting of tame, the other of wild creatures. Is there then a hunting of tame creatures? Okay, so Theaetetus is a little bit on guard, even for somebody who's being very agreeable. The hunting of tame creatures is just maybe a bridge too far. Nobody hunts sheep or cows or any other tame animal. In fact, the reason we don't hunt them is because they're tame. It's not fun to chase a cow. They don't run fast enough. So this is a very questionable argument. But we can see it here. So he has this division of wild and tame. And he's going to make a division here as well. So they're going to follow the tame, right? He says, yes, there is a hunting of tame creatures, if man is a tame animal. But make any assumption you like, that there is no tame animal, or that some other tame animal exists, but man is a wild one, or that man is tame and there is no hunting of man. For the purpose of our definition, choose whichever of these statements you think is satisfactory to you. Why, stranger, I think we humans are a tame animal, and I agree that there is a hunting of man. Well, let us then say that the hunting of tame animals is also of two kinds. All right, so how do we justify that assertion? By defining piracy, man-stealing, I think that might be kidnapping, I'm not sure what else to make of that one. Piracy, man-stealing, tyranny, and the whole art of war are all collectively as hunting by force. So again, we have a category name. You can think of this as like a class and its members. So the class is hunting by force. And you have to ask yourself, are these really the members of that class? First of all, piracy. Is that a force of, is that a kind of hunting, piracy? Is kidnapping hunting? Is tyranny hunting? Is war hunting? You can also, of course, always question if these are actually arts, but we'll leave that one aside. I've mentioned that many times. So you can, that question is always there. Is this an art? Every single time you want to ask that. Is this really an art? But also we can see here that the class and its members simply don't make any sense. Um, but Theaetetus says it's excellent. And by giving the art of the law courts, of the public platform, and of conversation also a single name, and calling them all collectively an art of persuasion. The law courts, public platform, um, conversation is conversation an art of persuasion? Like, what kind of conversations does this person have? So there are a lot of assumptions here, and you can very much question if these really are the members of that category as well. But coming back here, we have now the hunting of tame animals is divided into those hunted by force and those by persuasion. Okay. Um, Now let us say that there are two kinds of persuasion. So notice that he's not even asking which of the two would you put the sophist in. He's just making the decision himself. So there's really no discussion here at all, and you can um, I think you can make the case both ways, really, if you wanted to make that conversation. Does the sophist work? Does, if you are accepting that the sophist is a kind of hunter of tame animals, is it by force or is it by persuasion? I think you can make both cases. But he doesn't question these, he just barrels ahead. So, two kinds of persuasion. What kinds? The one has to do with private persons, the other with the community. Granted, each of them does form a class. Again, there's no explanation, no clarifying. Are you dealing with individuals or community? How is that different, right? What does that have to do with the sophist? Can't the sophist do both? And when people speak in the public platform, would you call that, working with individuals, or is that community? So it doesn't make sense. And you can work one-on-one. The sophists were known to charge people one-on-one for training, and they also train people to speak in public. So you can see both of them there. But he says, but Theaetetus says, granted, each of them does form a class. Then again, of the hunting of private persons. One kind receives pay and the other brings gifts, does it not? Now, first of all, when you're dealing with art, strictly speaking, if you get paid for the art, that's something separate from the art itself. Using medicine again as an example, Doctors Without Borders perform their art for free. It's volunteer. Nobody's going to say, sorry, you're not a real doctor because you're not charging money. So it doesn't make sense, right? There are volunteer clinics in every country. There are volunteers that travel around, such as Doctors Without Borders. So the art of medicine is one thing, receiving pay is something else. And yet here he's tying that in, saying that the hunting of private persons, even though he mentioned up here the public platform and law courts, so obviously it's in public, but he's ignoring all that and saying the sophist works with private persons only. And there's some sort of pay, either in the form of money or in the form of gifts. Well, he says, I don't understand, and that's good because it doesn't make any sense. But he's going to explain these two, and what he's going to call amatory and the other payment. Okay, so he says he doesn't understand what this means by the bringing of gifts. Stranger says, well, apparently you've never paid attention to the lover's method of hunting. Okay, so now lovers are also hunters, as if, well, that gives a very, um, a very certain image of love, that it's hunting. Well, in what respect? That in addition to their other efforts, they give presents to those whom they hunt. Okay, so you're not the object of affection. The person isn't chasing you because or trying to get your love. They're hunting you. They're not trying to get your love because they care about you. No, they're hunters and you're their prey. So there's a very distinct image of lovers, right? But Theaetetus says, oh, you're quite right. Well, let us then call this the amatory art. Agreed. But that part of the paid kind, which converses to furnish gratification and makes pleasure exclusively its bait, and demands as its pay only maintenance, we might all agree, if I'm not mistaken, to call the art of flattery or of making things pleasant. Okay, so first let me back up a little here. So there's the amatory art and then there's the payment. And now he's going to go on to the next section. And we're going to see this is where the sophist lands. And then the other category is this flattery that he's mentioning just now. So let's go back and make sure we're clear on this. So what he's calling flattery furnishes gratification and it makes pleasure exclusively its bait. So you can ask yourself, is that really what flattery is? Is that what it does? That makes pleasure exclusively its bait? And does it demand as its pay only maintenance? What does that even mean? It doesn't make any sense at all. Think of why people flatter someone else. Is it for their own maintenance? It doesn't make any sense. We might all agree, if I'm not mistaken, to call the art of flattery of making things pleasant. Okay, Theaetetus seems to understand it. He says, certainly. But the class which proposes to carry on its conversations for the sake of virtue and demands its pay in cash, does not this deserve to be called by another name? This might just be my favorite line in the whole dialogue. It's for the sake of virtue. And no credit cards, please. I only take cash. So that might be my favorite line. It's for the sake of virtue, but cash up front. Yeah. Demands its pay in cash.
Again, it has nothing to do with the art. Even if you do consider sophistry an art, getting paid is not part of the art.
And what is the name? Try to tell. Theaetetus says it's obvious, for I think we have discovered the sophist. And therefore, by uttering that word, I think I should give him the right name. Then, as it seems, according to our present reasoning, Theaetetus, the part of appropriative, coercive hunting art, which hunts animals, land animals, tame animals, man, privately, for pay, paid in cash, claims to give an education. He didn't actually say that, but he said for the sake of virtue. So it's a bit of a stretch because, yeah, but he didn't actually say anything about education. But he claims to give an education and is a hunt after rich and promising youths. Mentioned briefly with the, rivers of a different kind. Must, so our present argument concludes, be called sophistry. So again, you can match that up to what is here: acquisitive, coercive, hunting, living creatures on foot, humans, tame. It's an art of persuasion, hunting individuals for payment. And he calls that sophistry. And he threw in a few other things, giving education and promising youths. Most assuredly, says Theaetetus, you can ask yourself if that is indeed a good definition of a sophist. You may agree with everything that's here, that it's hunting. You may call it hunting, and you may agree that it is for pay, and that maybe the sophist treats people as prey to be hunted. You can certainly make the case. But again, there's a lot of figurative language there. It's not a proper definition. Well, now let's see where he goes on from here. Right. He says, let's look at it still another way. So he's going to give another definition now. So we're going to see ways that he can take that basic list. Let me go back to it here. And he's just going to toy with it. Actually, we can go ahead a little bit here, give you a little bit of a sneak peek. So he started from the pedestrian or not on foot with the first definition. And now we're going to see that he's going to come back up here. Okay, and we'll see how he does that. He says, let's look at it in still another way. For the class we are now examining partakes of no mean art, but of a very many-sided one. And we must indeed do so, for in our previous talk, it presents an appearance of being, not what we now say it is, but another class. Well, how so? The acquisitive art was of two sorts. The one the division of hunting, the other that of exchange. Okay, now, I do want to point out here that he's changing the words here because what he calls here hunting was before coercive, and what he's calling here exchange was before voluntary. And that's why I have those two names here. And I'm going to go back just a moment.
I'm going to go back just a few pages to show you where those terms came up originally.
And are there, this is page 275. Let me give you the Stephanus numbers. 219D. For those of you with a different translation, it's 219D. It's page 275 if you're using the same text here. He says are there not two classes of acquisitive art? One, the class of exchange between voluntary agents by means of gifts and wages and purchases, and the other, which comprises all the rest of acquisitive art, and since it coerces, either by word or deed, might be called coercive. Okay, so he had those two categories, voluntary and coercive. By the way, up above here, where he says that there's the whole class of learning and that of acquiring knowledge and money making and fighting and hunting, none of these is creative, but they are all engaged in coercing. Okay, so there he says they're all coercive, and then 2 seconds later he's dividing acquisitive art into voluntary and coercive. So there he used those names, and now he's using different names, but he's talking about the same thing. So you can see in that earlier page there, he was talking about exchanging gifts and whatnot. There's an exchange, so there he used the word exchange between voluntary agents. So now he's switching the language because that's what's more convenient to what he wants to say. So the acquisitive art was of two sorts. The one, the division of hunting, the other that of exchange. Yes, it was. Now shall we say that there are two sorts of exchange? So notice, so the word exchange is convenient to him. So that's what he's going to use now. And he says, there are two sorts of exchange, the one by gift and the other by sale. So be it. Sorry. And we shall say further that exchange by sale is divided into two parts. How so? We make this distinction, calling the part which sells a man's own productions the selling of one's own, and the other which exchanges the works of others, exchange. Okay, I didn't bother making the list for each of these because this one's much shorter, but I think you see the pattern here that he's developing, the way that he proceeds. So he went from, so there's a gift or by sale. He's following the sales without any discussion. And then saying that you can be selling your own products or you can sell the works of others. Certainly. Well, then that part of exchange which is carried on in the city, amounting to about half of it, is called retailing, is it not? Yes. And that which exchanges goods from city to city by purchase and sale is called merchandising? Certainly. Is it certain? Does that make sense? So he's got this definition of retailing versus versus merchandising. That was a mouthful. Um, and if it's carried on within the city, he calls that retailing. If it's between cities, it's called merchandising. I'm pretty sure these words can be used synonymously. Um, Not really clear what he's doing there. Um, well, we can see, but in the case of the Sophists were known to go city to city selling their teachings, air quotes. So we can see what he wants to do with it. But as far as a definition, is that really a definition? And again, when you're looking at what a thing is, do you look at where it's done? Um, it's a questionable use of a definition there. Okay, so we have not observed that one part of merchandising sells and exchanges for cash whatever serves the body. So notice he just jumped to merchandising because again, the Sophists were famous for going city to city. But of course, they also had customers, and because they probably think of their students as customers, um, they had students or customers, within their own city state. And so this idea of distinguishing within the city or between cities doesn't necessarily make any sense. And I think you can be, if you're a sophist, you can be a sophist with your native peoples as well. And it's not as if there were no sophists in Athens, right? Um, okay. But yeah, he just jumped straight to merchandising as the category he's going to follow. Have we not observed that one part of merchandising sells and exchanges for cash whatever serves the body for its support and needs, and the other whatever serves the soul? What do you mean by that? Perhaps we do not know about the part that has to do with the soul, though I fancy we do understand the other division. Yes. Take, therefore, the liberal arts in general, that constantly go about from city to city, bought in one place and carried to another and sold, painting and conjuring, and the many other things that affect the soul, which are imported and sold partly for its entertainment and partly for its serious needs. We cannot deny that he who carries these about and sells them constitutes a merchant properly so called, no less than he whose business is the sale of food and drink. Very true. Then will you give the same name to him who buys up knowledge and goes about from city to city exchanging his wares for money? Certainly. Now, one part of this soul merchandising might very properly be called the art of display, might it not? So now he's going to separate, notice he took the category of soul merchandising as opposed to body merchandising. You can question that as well because, the sophists they did claim to teach virtue, but they also claimed to make people good speakers or to make them successful in their careers. And so, therefore, they can make them wealthy. And so, that's more for the physical comforts. And so, for the body, you can argue. So, you can question, is it really for the soul? Um, so, you see at every turn, really. You can question the categories themselves, you can question the class and the members of the class, and you can also question why he chooses the division he does when he's following what is the sophist. All right, so one part of this soul merchandising might very properly be called the art of display, might it not? But since the other part, though no less ridiculous than the first, is nevertheless a traffic in knowledge, must we not call it by some name akin to its business? Certainly. Now, of this merchandising and knowledge, the part which has to do with the knowledge of the other arts should be called by one name, and that which has to do with virtue by another. So, again, he never explained what the art of display is. I guess you can display your paintings, I guess is what he means. I'm not sure. I honestly don't know what the art of display is, as he's calling it here, but he calls it ridiculous because he probably realizes, He's, playing the role of a sophist here. So he knows, and he knows better. He's a he's a Parmenian, so he knows better. And he's called a real philosopher in the beginning. So it's all kind of tongue in cheek here, right? So he calls it ridiculous. But now he's going to go on to this idea of merchandising and knowledge. The name of art merchandising would fit the one who trades in the other arts. And now, do you be so good as to tell the name of him who trades in virtue. Now, it's not really determined that he does indeed trade in virtue, as it was questionable with the previous definition as well, and here it's just thrown in. What other name could one give without making a mistake than that which is the object of our present investigation, the sophist? No other. Come then, let us now summarize the matter by saying that sophistry has appeared a second time. Right, so our second definition is that part of acquisitive art, the art of exchange, not voluntary, but exchange this time, of trafficking, of merchandising, of soul merchandising, which deals in words and knowledge and trades in virtue. So there's his definition. But then he says there's a third class. If a man settled down here in town and proposed to make his living by selling these same wares of knowledge. So before he followed there was that one split of merchandising within the city or between cities. And now he's saying we can make a third definition that would be all the same except that it's within the city. So he is acknowledging that one as well. He proposed to make his living by selling the same wares of knowledge within the town, buying some of them and making others himself. You would, I fancy, not call him by any other name than that which you used a moment ago. Certainly not. Then also that part of acquisitive art which proceeds by exchange and by sale, whether as mere retail trade or the sale of one's own productions, no matter which, so long as it is of the class of merchandising and knowledge, you will always apparently call sophistry. I must do so, for I have to follow where the argument leads. And apparently that's where it led. So he is acknowledging it can be within the city or between cities. But then all the rest of that argument he's arguing still holds. All right, well, let us examine further and see if the class we are now pursuing has still another aspect of similar nature. Of what nature? We agreed that fighting was a division of acquisitive art. Yes, we did. Then it is quite fitting to divide it into two parts. So coming back here, we see that he is now going to make, actually that he called his third definition. There were two that came out of the voluntary and coercive, or the exchange, right? So between cities or within the same city. And then we have a fourth definition that's going to follow from fighting. And there was a division of hunting and fighting. And hunting, he said, was secret, whereas fighting is in the open. So apparently if you fight someone secretly, it's not a fight, it's a hunt. I'm not sure. So anyway, that was when he was talking about the angler. But now he's taking this category here. He followed this one before. Now apparently we're not calling the sophist a hunter anymore. We're calling this person a fighter. And so now he's going to divide this into two parts. We agreed that fighting was a division of acquisitive art. Yes, we did. Then it is quite fitting to divide it into two parts. Tell what the parts are. Let us call one part of it the competitive and the other the pugnacious. Now you can argue they're not exactly synonyms. You can be competitive without being pugnacious, but there's a lot of overlap there, so they're not really two categories. But Theaetetus agrees. Then it is reasonable and fitting to give to that part of the pugnacious. So notice again, he just chooses which category without any discussion with Theaetetus. It is reasonable and fitting to give to that part of the pugnacious which consists of bodily contests some such name as violent. Yes. And what other name than controversy shall we give to the contests of words? So there's violence versus controversy in words. But controversy must be divided into two kinds. How? Whenever long speeches are opposed by long speeches on questions of justice and injustice in public, that is forensic controversy. Long speeches opposed by other long speeches, questions of justice and injustice. So there he's giving the title forensic controversy to this very specific category here. That is not actually any category that anyone's ever heard of. But that which is carried on among private persons and is cut up into little bits by means of questions and their answers. Sounds like Socrates, doesn't it? We are accustomed to call argumentation, are we not? We are. And that part of argumentation which deals with business contracts, in which there is controversy, to be sure, but it is carried on informally and without rules of art. It has no rules. Remember, at the very top of our list of all of this is art. So whatever else we would say about the sophist, we're assuming, or he's assuming, that it is an art. And yet now he's saying there are no rules of art in one of the categories. It deals only with business contracts. It's carried on informally, and there are no rules in your business contracts, really. All that must be considered a distinct class, and one I don't want a part of, now that our argument has recognized it as different from the rest. But it received no name from our predecessors, and nor does it now deserve to receive one from us. Okay, we're going to put that aside, those business contracts that are negotiated, that are controversial and negotiated informally without rules. Okay, true, for the divisions into which it falls are too small and too miscellaneous. I don't know what they are at all. But that which possesses rules of art and carries on controversy about abstract justice and injustice and the rest in general, we are accustomed to call disputation, are we not? Certainly. Now, I often will point out the word abstract. In Platonic metaphysics, we don't talk about abstract. So that's really the translator's word. Yeah, actually, I'm looking at the Greek. It's actually self-justice, justice self, auto, but justice itself is the way it's often translated, or absolute justice. When you talk about something being abstract, it's like it's stripped of all of its meaning. You're starting from, this is the common thinking, the conventional way of thinking, that we start from our physical world being what is real, and we strip things of, we'll strip an idea like justice of everything real about it and just make it something abstract, just a concept that has no vitality, no depth to it. It's just this empty, abstract, dead concept. That's the way that many people think. That's the conventional mode of thought. Platonists, though, say that that's upside down. What is truly real, what is most real, are the eidos, or the ideas, the forms, the ideas. They are what is most real. And then as they filter down through the various realms, they become more differentiated and take on an aspect of being potential, in the sense of that they're not the full actuality of the idea itself. And so the word abstract is one that the translator chose, fitting the translator's state of mind. Ironically, it kind of fits this dialogue, actually, because the sophist, or the stranger functioning as a sophist here, is going to treat the eidos as abstract concepts, and so it kind of fits in a way. But the actual Greek there is justice itself, or justice self. Okay, so, but then he says, okay, here we are. We have that one category of business contracts that are negotiated informally without rules. And the other category, there are rules, and it carries on controversy or discussions or arguments about the absolute realities. And he says, well, of disputation, and then he just leaves it. Okay, well, of disputation, one sort wastes money, the other makes money. Again, that has nothing to do with art, and it has nothing certainly to do with the discussion of absolute realities. Let us try to tell the name by which we must call each of these. Yes, we must do so. Presumably, the kind which causes a man to neglect his own affairs for the pleasure of engaging in it. Again, sounds like Socrates. But the style of which causes no pleasure to most of his hearers. Well, it brings no pleasure to some of his hearers, certainly. That is, in my opinion, called by no other name than garrulity or talking too much, right? So that may be a little bit of an insult from the perspective of the sophist. Obviously, I don't think that this stranger truly feels that way about Socrates, but that's maybe the way that many sophists viewed Socrates. They would probably say this fits him very well. And Theaetetus said, yeah, that is about what it's called. Then the opposite of this, the kind which makes money from private disputes. Try now, for it is your turn to give it a name. Excuse me, to give it its name. I just hiccuped there. Sorry about that. So now, if you see this as the opposite of this previous one, then the implication is that it does cause pleasure to those who listen. And it would have to if you're going to make money at it, right? So that assumption is there that what the sophists do is interesting to other people. They enjoy it, whereas what Socrates does is just annoying. All right, so give it a name. What other answer could one give without making a mistake than that now again, for the fourth time, that wonderful being whom we have so long been pursuing has turned up, the sophist? Yes, and the sophist is nothing else apparently than the money-making class of the disputatious, argumentative, controversial, pugnacious, combative, acquisitive art, as our argument has now again stated. Now, notice this definition here doesn't really sound like somebody who's enjoyable to listen to, but we'll put that aside. Do you see the truth of the statement that this creature is many-sided, and as the saying is, not to be caught with one hand? Well, then we must catch him with both. And he says, we're going to go on another track now. I'm going to stop right about here. I'll show you just this last quote here. Yes, we must, and must go at it with all our might by following another track of his. Now, the reason I'm going to stop here is because from this point, he's going to leave the old pattern and he's going to take a little bit different turn. And so I'm going to save this one because this is a long conversation in and of itself. And this one has a little bit more meat to it. Before, up to this point, everything was kind of tongue in cheek and there's really nothing to be taken seriously about the definitions he's coming up with. But he is going to take a turn from here. And so there are things that are worth discussing in more detail because there are some things that we can look at as, oh, this is a good argument, or this is, he's saying something worth actually discussing and considering. So I'm going to save that part for next week. Hopefully Jacob will be back next week and he'll be feeling better. And up to this point, so now we've passed like the first section, you might say. I guess you can make the introduction a first part of it. And so, but of the body of it, it's really divided into a few different sections here. And so we just finished the first section, the tongue-in-cheek section, where he's demonstrating the techniques of the sophist. So if you have any questions about what we've covered so far, if you have any further comments, any insights you have into this section of the dialogue, please put those in the comments section. And as always, I thank you for watching and hope you'll join me next time. Thank you very much.